Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 104. Thank you for tuning in. I'm very happy to introduce you to today's guest. Sonja Rosas is a nature journaler from the Pacific Northwest in the USA. I knew a little about Sonja's story through the blog post that she wrote for International Nature Journaling Week this year, but it was an absolute joy to spend this hour learning more of that story, and I can't wait to share it with you now. Let's listen. Sonja, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm really happy and excited to chat with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So your story, it feels like nature journaling has been this winding, coming to, stepping away from thing throughout your whole life, and that you had nature and art in your life from the beginning. And so I wonder if we could just let the conversation sort of roam over your story from childhood and into adulthood and the ways that nature journaling has touched you throughout your life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was thinking about that. I know that this is a question you ask. I've heard other guests say that.
Yeah.
So I think when I think about that, like my childhood and in nature, I think about the ways in which my parents, both in their own different ways, taught me how to engage with nature in ways that are thoughtful and gentle and kind. Like that was the groundwork of it. I think about, like, for instance, my mom, she was always such a good source of like whimsy and fantasy. There was a book, I can't think of who the author was right now, but it was this lavishly illustrated book about gnomes as if they were a real species.
Wow.
And it captivated her as a child. I took one look at it, and it just draws you in. It makes you curious, and it's beautiful. It's all these watercolors. And so going out into the woods with her, like Discovery Park, Carkeek Park in Seattle, you know, we would go deep into these woods with these moss caverns and the big leaf maples, and we'd build like little fairy houses up against the trees. And she'd come up with these fantastical stories about fairies and things. And so that really brought like the because I think in Western culture a lot, we have a tendency to, you know, nature, we're going to be very empirical and have science over here. But it's important too to remember that like you have to have a soul connection to this stuff for it to really have a deep impact on your life, right?
Absolutely.
So mom was that wonderful conduit of like fantasy and intuition and like sensation in nature. And then with my father, it was sort of like this swashbuckling adventure time, you know, like we would go trail running in the woods near my house when I was a little kid. And I decided that, you know, it'd be super cool if we were a wolf pack. So we called ourselves the Hardback. So we'd go running and like we'd howl and stuff. Or we'd go out to the tide pools at low tide in Puget Sound, and we'd walk out as far as we could go. He'd put me on his shoulders, and we'd look at the sea anemones and stuff. Like, I think for him it was important that I was as like least squeamish as possible. Like we'd find like an earthworm or a snail, and he'd, you know, okay, this is this little guy, blah blah blah. And then before we put it back, he's like, all right, now give him a kiss. You know, like how some like sport fishermen kiss the fish before they throw it back, that kind of thing. So, you know, I was a little kid, I'd see an earthworm and be like, no, that's my buddy. I love that guy.
Yes, that is so fantastic. You had the whimsy from your mom, the adventure from your dad, and that all sort of seeped in.
Yeah, it coalesced. It was a really good meeting of like philosophies and perspectives. I feel like I really benefited from that. That, and then also just being lucky enough to grow up, and I think, you know, one of the most fantastic biomes in the entire world, you know, over here in the Pacific Northwest, was just a perfect constellation. Like if you were going to create a budding tiny naturalist in a petri dish, those are some of the ingredients you would begin with, you know.
Tell us about some of the environment around you. Tell us about.
Oh, okay. So the way I would describe it to you, if you were an alien coming down out of outer space, is you would want to go toward the Western Hemisphere. In the northern corner, you want to go to the northwest part of North America or the United States. And then we are nestled in, so Packwood, which is the town where I live, is nestled in the Cowlitz River Valley. It's in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. There's like the Goat Rocks and the Tatoosh Range. Mount Rainier is like right over my shoulder. You can see it. Like if you're in Seattle and people say, you know, the mountain's out, that means you can see Mount Rainier. It's a nice day. It looks huge. It has these long flanks. It's like all lofty. It's looking down over the city. You come to Packwood, people are like, "Where's the mountain? Where's the mountain?" So we go to the parking lot at the grocery store and go, "There it is." And because it's so close, it just kind of looks like a humdrum but very, very white dome on the horizon. Yeah, and also speaking of the Goat Rocks, right now we actually are having an active forest fire. So that's something that's interesting. I've been kind of tracking it over time. We actually got evacuated due to the fire activity last month. You know, no properties have been damaged, no one's been injured, but it's just interesting to have that phenomenon going on, like literally up the highway a couple of miles, if that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Having spoken to several people in your region over this period of podcasting, it's made me so captivated and excited to visit that area one day. It sounds so beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. I tell anyone and everyone who thinks that they, you know, I'd like to go there someday, like just do it. It's phenomenal. Yeah. I love it. I'm the luckiest person alive.
Your energy is amazing. And for like energy for nature, it's just, I'm smiling right now.
Yeah, well, good. See, that's how I feel. That was, you know, I've worked in like environmental education and like, you know, volunteering at zoos and conservation sort of organizations, that kind of thing. And, you know, when I was a teenager doing that, especially when I started, it was always like, you know, we want to educate young people and people in general about nature so that they will have those stewardships, so that they will take care of it. And that's super important. But I think you're almost like putting the cart before the horse in some cases. Like, I think because with those conservation messages, a lot of times it skips to like this doom and gloom perspective. And I think we need to scale it back and just have the perspective that like, if you spend time in nature in whatever way that looks like for you, whether it's going for a jog, going fishing, just going for a drive, going to a walking park, as my mom calls them, that's good for you. That feeds your soul. That makes you a happier, healthy, more balanced human being. And, you know, if you have the wherewithal and the means and the desire to then pay that forward with stewardship, that's great. But you know, let's cross that first threshold before we keep going up the trail, you know?
Yeah, I agree 100%. So in the past, when you were a kid, you had times where you were nature journaling. You told a story about how you wanted to take your notebook and be like your idols from National Geographic. And can you tell that story?
Yeah. Oh man. When I was younger, we lived with my grandparents, and my Papa Rod would get the National Geographic, and it was my favorite. Like it's like that bright Ticonderoga pencil yellow outline, and like I'd always try to get it before he got home so I could read it. And I loved the story about J. Michael Fay, who did the mega transect through like Central Africa. And he did it on foot. Like it was ridiculous. Like if, you know, you're a little kid who thinks that like that kind of adventure is a great time and not a hellish nightscape, you know, a hellish environment. You know, he's like, oh, we're getting attacked by leeches and just cutting down trees and having to build houses out of sticks. But, you know, he was discovering all these fantastic things, you know, these monkeys, these rare forest elephants. And I wanted to take notes like they did, like Joel Sartor's Medidi Diary is what they called it. And they had like the images of his notebook. They were all mildewed and buggy. And I was like, oh, that's so rugged. That's like Indiana Jones. And I think it was fourth or fifth grade, the Woodland Park Zoo sent some ambassador educators out to come talk to us about, you know, just being interested in nature, that kind of thing. And they handed out these cute little handy dandy waterproof notebooks, Right in the Rain notebooks. And they said, you know, take them and go out and explore. So I go out, I like check out a book from the school library about pill bugs. And I go out and like in my aunt's backyard, I roll over a log. I'm looking at the pill bugs. I'm looking at the book. And it's like, it's very difficult to know where to start, especially I think too, like, you know, so many kids coming up in school, we're taught like there's a correct way to do this. There's like a right, like it's an assignment, you know? I'm not, like how would I know if I'm doing it right? Like that's another fallacy in education. Like, are you really doing it right or wrong? Are you just expressing yourself in a very human way? So I don't think I put anything in that notebook. I hung out there and like got really anxious about it, and then I kind of just forgot about it. Like I don't know how to do this properly, so I'm just, you know, not. But you know, I was 10 or 11, so I'm sure I just wandered off and found a video game, which, you know, not ideal, but it eventually worked itself out, I think.
And if you were talking to yourself now, or you were mentoring yourself, how would you have encouraged yourself to to start, to get something down on the page?
I think so. I think I would appeal to little Sonia's desire for like empiricism and official like scientific knowledge. I think I would like whip out some scientific papers about growth mindset and sort of like this is demonstrable and it's there's peer reviewed studies about this, and I think she would have bought it. You know, and maybe a couple of platitudes that are helpful to me. Like better an imperfect something than a perfect nothing. That kind of
Yeah,
thing,
yeah, yeah.
like a subliminal message while I'm asleep, something like that.
National Geographics were so important to me when I was a
Yeah,
kid as well.
right.
I used to trim out all the pages and stick them in a notebook and then rewrite a story, but with myself in
Oh, I
them.
love that. Oh, that's fantastic.
There was so much scope for. That's a quote from Anne of Green Gables. There's so much scope for
Oh,
imagination.
oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, there was so much excitement that you could generate by imagining yourself in those scenes.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. I also work sometimes at the local libraries here in the next town over, and recently we had a button maker, and so our coworkers and I figured out how to use the button maker, and we got a bunch of magazines, like a lot of like science and naturey stuff, and left out a bunch of pictures, and it was really fun to watch the kids like. Kids would come in, they choose something out of National Geographic, and I'd ask them like, "Why that one?" And just to hear them, like spontaneously produce these like interesting associations based on the images without any context.
Yeah,
It's
that's
fun.
so fun.
Yeah.
So, when you were younger, in your teen years, you had a fascination with sub-Saharan Africa and you
Oh
had this
yeah.
plan to be a
Oh
game
yeah, I
ranger.
did.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so okay, when I for as long as I can remember, my favorite movie was the original 1994, The Lion King,
Mm.
obviously, like one of the best of all time. Actually, as I've gotten older, I'm like, this is a little bit of a problematic story, but
Yes.
it's still. Thank you. I'm glad you agree. I
Yeah.
like feel guilty letting it go. Like it's always been like number one of my favorite movies ever.
It's so bad
It's like
revisiting
it
childhood loved
is.
movies because then you see
Yeah.
all the problems later on. I showed The Lion King to my son recently and I was like, oh, gee, I'm not sure about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're just sort of like, this is all about like, live up to other people's expectations of you, which is not the best message for a traumatized young man, even if he's a lion. Um, but that's something about it, just gripped a hold of me. You can ask my parents. I like wore out a couple VHS tapes of that movie, and it just, it wasn't even so much the story. I think it was like the rich, those rich oil painting backgrounds are just
Mm-mm-mm.
so they draw you in, even in a 2D, two dimensions. um, this being before the the sort of computer animation took off in such a way that it's almost limitless. It's easier
Yes.
to do than hand drawn animation. And so that was sort of just like a fixation for me. I liked it. I liked the music. I liked the rhythms of it. I like to explore like different media. And I read this book called, I think it was called The Wilderness Family, and it was written by this woman whose husband worked as a game ranger in Kruger National Park, and it was about all these adventures they went on. And me being 13, 14, I was like, I want to do that. That sounds cool. And finding out about how to be a guide out there. But of course, I'm here. I am smack dab in the middle of Portland, Oregon at that time. And I thought, well, okay, so I can't practice, tracking or plant identification out there. I might as well just use this convenient natural environment around me as practice for when it's time to learn the real stuff. And of course, I didn't see it coming, but along the way, I would like kind of let that sub-Saharan Africa obsession fall by the wayside because everything around me is there's a place where you begin to learn about it or learn to experience it, but there's not one where it ends. So I'm never going to be done learning about like
Yes.
what's right outside my door. It's like I don't have time to go. I need to do all that. I'm focused on this. I need to know what these salmon are up to.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love the way you express that yeah, we
Yeah.
can look out. There's amazing things
Yes.
very far from us and there's amazing things right here wherever we find
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah, like the profound is always just like a couple of inches below
Yeah.
the mundane, but it can be such an effort to scrape below that level, especially like you're doing laundry and you're running errands, that kind of thing. So, um, but yeah, it's just sort of like if you have a magnifying lens and you go out to the curb and you start investigating between the blades of grass, you will discover a whole microscopic world that will keep you occupied. You look up and 2 hours have gone by and you're just drawn in as if it were reality television, but like, better.
It's so fantastic that young Sonja knew that because a lot of young people don't see that. They're busy,
Yeah.
busy with
Yeah.
whatever young people are busy, whatever young people are busy with these days.
whatever the kids are into, the fellow kids. Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories that my mom tells from when I was little, when I was real little, my very best friend in the whole wide world is my cousin Alexa, and she and her family lived in a small apartment in Portland, and we would go visit them for a week or two at a time. We lived in Seattle, and right outside of their apartment was like a patch of grass, like jutting out into the parking lot that was probably like, I mean, it seemed bigger in my memory, but I was, 2 or 3 years old. It was probably like 3 feet square,
Yeah.
and it just had like some scrubby little branches in it, some weeds and stuff. And we used to play in there for hours. For hours, we would be occupied. I like just playing make believe, pretend. A few years later, like as a teenager, my mom said, "Hey, let's go by that apartment." So we go by, and she goes, "Look, that's the place where you used to go play." And I'm like, "How? How did we even fit in there?" First of all, and how did it occupy our attention for hours on end? It just seemed like nothing is as it seems in the universe. You know what I mean? Like there's always layers to it.
That's the magical thing about childhood.
Yeah,
You can see things that grown-ups can't see.
it is. And I think that's like one of the things I'm always trying to do is how can I shake things up or change my habits in such a way that I can continue to see the world in that way. And I think, obviously the best way to learn is from the experts. So if there's any way you can spend time around children, particularly like elementary school and younger, they're just fountains of curiosity, like delightful to be around. They notice things that you have already filtered out before you even arrived on scene. Uh, yeah, I think they are probably my best teachers as far as like curiosity goes.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. So tell me about. So let's revisit this idea of perfectionism and how that affected your nature journaling. You wrote in your blog post that you had a bit of a habit of tossing out old journals.
Oh yeah. Oh
Tell
yeah.
me about
Oh
that.
God. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people. So if you're out here and if you're out there listening and you can identify with this, like I'm giving you a high five or a hug or a fist bump. Maybe you finally get up the gumption to start this sketchbook, and maybe it's going okay, but then all of a sudden something goes wrong, and by wrong I mean like it's not a pretty picture. I'm sure most of your audience is familiar with the like we're
Yes.
not making pretty pictures, but also there's a big part of your brain that desperately wants you to make a pretty picture, even if you tell yourself you don't. Like I don't care what it ends up looking, but there's a
Yeah.
little part of you that would
Yeah.
be thrilled if it were nice. Or you make a mistake, or you just are struggling with the material. It can feel like, oh, it's been ruined. And so for me, a lot of times that was like, I'm going to rip out the page. Or, if it had been too long since I had worked in a sketchbook, I would just toss it and start another one. Like, okay,
Yeah.
wasteful and a little neurotic, but, you know, sometimes throwing things away is deeply cathartic, but it doesn't help you get sketchbooks full. Yeah.
And you came across the work of Claire Walker Leslie, and she's got, like
Oh,
you
yeah.
write, this loose and fearless style,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that I think maybe something that we can all aspire to.
Yes, I love. I have a copy of her book, How to Keep or Keeping a Nature Journal, which
Mm-hmm.
I found that at a library in Portland when I was 14, 15, and about that time I had been keeping a nature journal, but it was mostly written. I love to draw. I was drawing all the time on the side, but I was like afraid to put drawing in my nature journal, even though like this tiny part of me that I had sealed away like really wanted me to. Like,
Yeah.
just do it. It doesn't have to be good. You can burn them. Just do it. It has to get out somehow. And so I used to just like pour over her work, and that really gave me the confidence to try adding a little picture here and there in the journal. Sometimes there would be something, like a moon or a little piece of a samara from a a little plant or a skull that I found, for instance.
Yeah.
Um, but it took me a long time to go from like that, like very sporadic, very like very
Tentative.
freaked out,
Mm-mm.
tentative little sketches to like just being able to whip out the sketchbook and draw stuff in it without really worrying too much.
How did that?
Um,
How did that happen? How did that step
uh,
happen?
so I mean, I kept journals off and on. Like sometimes I would usually have one that was just like sort of like a diary, but a visual diary, just like how I was feeling or weird situations that happened at work, and then I would have the nature journal. Um, but it wasn't very consistent. It was consistently inconsistent, I'll say. Like sometimes I would be able to keep it up for a month or so. But I think the true turning point came during the early part of the pandemic. You know, I got laid off from my seasonal job. We're hanging around the house. It's like we can't go anywhere. We can't go see anyone. We're just sort of like blah, you know, like the fun of, oh my gosh, we don't have to work now, you know,
Yeah.
had worn off. It was sort of like, what am I doing with my life? What can I do? How much control do I have right now? And I stumbled across Marley Piper's Unlocking Your Potential YouTube video. You know, I'm just like scrolling through looking at his nature journaling videos, and I clicked on that one. And you know, at first I'm like, you know, he says like get a pencil and paper and like follow along, answer these questions, and you know, I'm like, I'll just listen to it. But the more he starts to talk about growth mindset and how you can shift, you know, what you consider to be a successful nature journal, like you can choose to change how you define success, how you define good enough, that's up to you. Maybe you got some presets out of the box. Maybe you've learned some things over the years, but those are not set in stone. It will take work to like rewire those neural connections, but that's doable. It's like training a dog. Like you do the thing even if you don't want to, and then you give yourself a pat on the back. Your brain's going to remember that. And that gave me, especially, you know, just the, you know, I'd gotten sick of sitting and staring at the television for hours on end. Like that novelty had worn off. So I got a sketchbook and I grabbed some colored pencils and I went out, and I'm so blessed to have it's about a 60-acre patch of land right across the street from my house. It's not contiguous with the rest of the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, but technically it is part of that forest. It used to be a ranger station. So I just went out there and I started sketching, and I used the colored pencil because it was so faint. Like if I wanted to flip through the book, no mistakes or perceived mistakes would jump out to me, and I could just focus on like, don't worry about quality, just focus on quantity, produce some stuff, like get it out of your system, and then start to worry about improving or getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. So is when you do go out now, what sorts of things do you take with you? You still take color pencils? What are your favorite things to take?
So okay, I will show you because you can see me. So I carry everything in this in a it's a Pajaro bag. I mean it's Pajaro. I don't know how to pronounce that properly, but they make bags for birders. But here's a pro tip: they're fantastic for nature journalers too. So I always have a sketchbook. I keep it pretty pared down. I do the non-photo blue pencil.
Hmm.
Shout out to John Muir Laws for that. That changed my life. Like that changed my life as far as drawing goes. Even before I really started nature journaling in a consistent way, I started using that just for like making little comics and stuff. I have a small watercolor palette, my painting sock for working in the field, a water brush, and a couple of things for making highlights, like
Yep.
a white pencil, white gel pen. And then, you know, some other curiosity supplies, as I like to call them, things like a magnifying lens for looking at tiny things, or binoculars for looking at things that are really far away. And lately, part of my curiosity kit has included fishing gear. I've recently gotten really into fishing.
Yeah.
And at first, I was concerned, like, if I'm spending all this time fishing, because once I started catching fish, I quickly got addicted this year. I started to worry, like, is that going to take away time from nature journaling? Like, I started to cling, you know, I was having that attachment feeling. But I said, no, let's just go with it. And what I discovered is like fishing gives you fantastic perspectives on things that are different than if you just are going out with the intention of I'm bird watching or I'm nature journaling. Um, Sometimes I keep my fish and I sketch them. And, you know, you do that a few times, you sketch a few species and you're like, okay, I'm ready for something different. So lately I've been sketching like cross sections of like
Yes.
the structure of streams or ponds or lakes, or what my rigs look like, what kind of lures I use, how I feel about different rods and reel combinations, and like maps of the places that I'm fishing. And it like I mean, I've always been interested in wetlands and forests and places near water, but it's like the surface was all I saw. I never thought about very much what was in it or what was below the surface. And now it's like I can't walk past or drive past a body of water without going like, oh, that's a riffle and that's a run, and oh, that looks like a fantastic fish hole. You know, it's this wonderful little obsession, and I love that we can sort of collect these little fascinating things that we can focus on. So you know, while you're going about your day running errands or whatever, you can hear a bird song or see a body of water and like have a little break to yourself to be curious and have wonder. You know.
I think it's so fabulous when people can combine one passion with nature journaling. Any outdoor
Yeah.
passion can be paired with it so beautifully, and fishing, I think, is great. And I love that it's changing your perspective on how you view the water, how you view the
Yeah.
ecosystem.
It's crazy. It's like having those glasses that have multiple lenses that flip
Yes.
down. It's like every layer. It's like the layers in Google Maps or something. The other thing that the other activities that can be great for this too is like I have friends who go mushroom picking, friends who
Mm.
go like huckleberry picking, friends who do all kinds of foraging. So I can follow them around. Or like recently, I went out rock hounding with some folks, and I for the first time, I don't like heights. I'll say this. I think rocks are great. I like looking along the road cuts for little pieces of things that are fun. We were getting blue jasper and some little quartz crystals. But then this guy Dave, who took us out, he had a ladder on top of his minivan, and so he puts it like a good 20 feet up on
On
the
a
side of
cliff.
this cliff,
Wow.
on a cliff, right next to a highway, like a road going through the windy national forest. And he and this other guy, Jordan, are up there, and they're taking turns, like, hitting on there was a pocket up there that was, if you looked up, it was a hole, and it was just lined entirely with crystals, but there was no good way to like get the crystals out of there. And so, they're both taking turns up there, and Dave's like, "Hey, do you want to? How are you with heights?" And I was like, "No, I don't like heights. They freak me out." But they kept like going up there and talking about how awesome it was. So finally I was like, all right, let me get up there. So I got up there. I'm very proud of myself, overcoming my fear of heights. I have a picture of myself. It was pretty cool. Plus I got to see, like, I would have driven past that and had no idea that there was a pocket of literal crystals growing on the side of a road cut in a random spot of a national forest road. Like that's the good stuff. That's like that increasing levels of granularity that I always feel like I'm striving for. Like what's behind the next layer? Like how deep does it go? I'm not sure there's a bottom. I don't think there's an end, but it's
How
fun.
fantastic. In fact, it's great that you've got friends who've got a ladder who are
Oh
willing to
yeah,
do
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's awesome. Like the fit. I say, like, if you have a particular interest, like don't hide it. Don't be ashamed of it. Like talk about how much you love fishing or doing whatever,
Yeah.
sewing. Like wear something. Like I read
Yeah.
once on social media, they said like if you want to make friends who love fishing, put a fish on
Yes.
your hat. You will make friends. So crow it loud and proud, and people who are interested in similar weird nerdy activities will be drawn together. It's pretty exciting. It's exciting when you get a bunch of like rock nerds or bird nerds or plant nerds or mushroom nerds all together and let them start like cross pollinating their knowledge. It's pretty exciting.
How did he know that that's where the cluster of crystals was going to be?
That was my question. That's everyone's question when I tell them the story. And he said, "Well, you follow the trail." And I'm like, "What? You can track minerals?" And he goes, "Well, yeah. So if you start, if you're just finding the green jasper and other just regular rocks along the side of the road, and then you start seeing crystals in this patch, well, those crystals had to have come down from somewhere.
Ah,
So if you
wow.
can like narrow down where it is on the cliff, you can sort of look up and find it." And I went down the cliff a little bit ways, and I was able to sort of find where there was the vicinity of where a pocket was, which
That's
is pretty
amazing.
cool.
We used to do this similar thing with my dad when we were kids. We would go into creeks and we had
Yeah,
like a sieve for gold panning. We weren't looking for gold, but we were looking for whatever
yeah.
precious stones, and then my dad would tumble them for us. It was
Oh,
quite
that's awesome.
exciting.
Were there agates out there?
I
Like, what were
can't
you looking
remember.
for?
We sapphires maybe.
Oh, that's
I
awesome. Yeah,
can't.
we don't have anything. We've got a lot of cool minerals, but no sapphires.
I don't
So.
think we ever found them, but I do remember very clearly being like, I found one. I think it was blue gold, but don't tell anyone.
Oh, yeah, right.
I mean,
Take a safe
blue glass,
Oh, yeah.
and I was certain, and I told the family, I found one. I found one. They didn't believe me, but I was excited.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you were happy, like, that's the happiness of discovery. That's so funny you say that about the beach glass. There is Bottle Beach up in Squim. I went with my partner and his family, and they have a little 3-year-old in the family, and so we spent an afternoon there. It's called Bottle Beach because about a mile and a half up away from where we were, there was a bottle beach back in the day, and they used to just toss like all their broken and
Oh,
discarded glass onto the beach, and it would get tumbled. So all along this stretch of beach, you can just sit there and pick through and
wow.
find some beautiful beach glass. It's crazy. You think like, okay, that if I told you like, hey, we're gonna go look, for beach glass, you might be sort of dubious about that. It's incredible how quickly your brain gets sucked into the
The
like, I
task.
want to seek and find. Little monkey brain wants to find all of the pretty shiny things.
That's so true. When you get
Yeah.
fixed on something like that,
Yeah.
it becomes addictive, doesn't it?
That I love that phenomenon, and then also the like when your brain gets the search image, like I think about the first time I went razor clamming. My friend was like, at first you aren't going to be sure you're seeing them, like you won't know if it's a clam tail or just a random little dimple in the sand, but it's like all of a sudden it seems like it happens automatically. You're like, I can't figure it out, I can't figure it out, and then all of a sudden your brain's like, that's the one. You're not even sure why, but you know that it's the right one. I love that moment when your brain is able to latch on. I wish I could
Yes.
see a video of what is happening when those synapses start firing and communicating with each other.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I was a kid. You're probably too young for this, but there was this thing called Magic Eye
Oh,
pictures. Have you seen
yeah.
those?
I can't get them to work. I've been trying. I must be doing so. Maybe it's because I have astigmatism. I'm not sure.
So for anyone who doesn't know, it's this sort of type of picture. You look, it looks a bit blurry. There's no image discernible, and if you look at it just long enough, just in the right way, you sort of fall into it, and you see this 3D image within this image, and it's like that. Once you hook onto it, you can't not see it. It's like that when searching for something in
See,
nature. Like,
I'm now that's gonna inspire me to like put some magic
dig
eye
one out.
books on hold at the library and just like spend like 10 minutes a day just practicing with them. I'll get it eventually. It's see the growth mindset. It's just practice. I that also reminds me of when I was working with my dad at a virtual construction company. I remember looking at blueprints and not being able to understand
Mm.
how the two-dimensional plane translated to three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm,
Like I would have to have that document open and then open up the 3D model and compare them side by side. Like it was so slow and painstaking. And then one day somebody handed me a two-dimensional blueprint and I looked at it and I understood it.
yes.
It's crazy. Like yesterday at 5 o'clock when I went home, this meant nothing to me. And today it has all this information. It's like, what else am I looking at that I don't that I'm not seeing or I'm not perceiving in a useful way? And how can I identify those if I don't know that I
Mm.
don't know them? You
Mm.
know,
Yeah, that's amazing. Isn't the brain incredible, and the things that
it's
it
so
can bend
weird.
around to
Yeah,
discover?
I think about that all the time. Like nothing that I am looking at is reality. It's just my perception of it. I mean, that's a whole other wormhole
Yeah.
of discovery that you can get trapped in. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just bizarre. It's weird feeling like you are this presence inside of an organic vehicle that is sensitive and thoughtful. And it's like, what do you do with this? I
I
feel like
know.
that's
And we've been dropped into this wonderland of things to be amazed about, right?
yes, a wonderland, but like there's so many distractions and it's hard to know where to focus. And I think that that is one of the best outlets that I get from nature journaling is just having the ability to focus really deeply on something is I think good for us. Like it's a good
Mm-mm.
mental workout, but it's also like it's comforting. It's like doing a puzzle or a crossword, and it can help you just feel centered and have a sense of place. Like it's something I have to do at this point,
Mm-mm.
especially if I'm in somewhere new. Like I immediately, like little monkey brain wants to start like nesting in this new space. How do I do that? Well, we're going to go out and meet some of our natural neighbors.
Yeah, that's beautifully expressed. Tell me about how nature journaling and just putting things down on paper and having those moments with your surroundings has helped.
I think it's because I've had so many of these experiences in nature, whether it was with the mood of the particular way that light came through the beautiful yellow fall leaves, or the way that the beach looks when the fog's rolling in and you can't see the city. You're in the smack dab in the middle of Seattle, but you can't see
Mm.
anything. It could be any time. There's all these like beautiful indelible moments that I wish that I could seal in a bottle
Mm.
and then like pop open so I can re-experience them. It's like I don't know, like the feelings are just so intense and they're so beautiful. Like they almost like often will move me to tears.
Yes.
And it's like I want to put lightning in a bottle in a way. And I think that nature journaling, might be photography for some people, whatever it might be, allows me to do that
Mm.
because then I really can, some if I'm having a down day or I'm sick or whatever it might be, or I just, want to go on a little adventure through time, I can just crack open that experience. And it's not my experience mediated through a third party. It's like a direct conduit of this is what it is like to be this organism on this planet. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think it's really easy to get bogged down in what is wrong in the world. And to be sure, there's a lot that can be improved but I don't think it's healthy for the primate brain to dwell on that. And I think we have to make time to focus on what is right and what is perfectly fine and what is beautiful and true and profound to give us the strength to continue to deal with the challenging stuff.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you said. I think that it's hard to dwell in that place, especially for someone who's sensitive or someone who's like open to the world in a sensitive way. And yeah, you need to restore, you need to connect, you need to build something inside you to fortify, to make those steps for stewardship or whatever it is. But we do need to repeatedly come back and center and just be with those places, be with those experiences.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it is like soul food.
Soul food.
And soul food, yeah, it's like I don't know. I'm sure to anyone listening, have you ever been struggling with a really intense emotion, and it seems like you've tried everything, you've tried some deep breathing, some gentle stretching, some tea, and you just go for a walk and you get distracted and pulled out of yourself. Like I know in Buddhism, they talk about lifting your gaze, because when your gaze is lowered, you're thinking about me, my problems, my stuff, my ego, blah blah blah. But if you can lift your gaze, you might see, let's say, a person playing frisbee with their dog on the beach, and that would, like, yes, your problems are not going to go away because of that, but you are going to be a little bit better off for enjoying. And just what a bizarre thing. Here are two species that are so different from each other, and they're connecting almost like a binary organism in this environment. And it's something that humans and dogs, for instance, have been doing for who knows how long, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And I think that when we enact and engage those sort of really pure and simple, like, sensory experiences, I think it's really good in a deep primordial sense. Maybe that's starting to get a little bit woo woo.
No, I get
that's
that.
Really how I feel about it.
Yeah. And you wrote about experiencing your nature around you at all hours of the day, including like in the night.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, connecting with raccoons in the evening and all those sort of nighttime experiences.
Oh, I think so. Man, there's been a lot of really cool ones. So I got really into tide pooling when I lived in the Magnolia neighborhood, which is really close to, like the Inner Bay, that whole area, a little bit north of the Seattle Center. There's Carkeek Park, there's Discovery Park. And as anyone who gets into tide pooling will tell you, the tides shift and change, and the best low tides for tide pooling, in the winter, are often in the dead of night, like 4 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
2 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock. And I had my bike, and I don't know when it first occurred to me that this was a fantastic idea to go urban tide pooling by myself, alone on bicycle. Sorry, Mom. But I would go, and it was so fun. You're in this contained space. You have a headlamp on, and so your field of vision is very narrow, and so it's so easy to get absolutely, like, pulled into the world on a single craggy rock on a beach next to, like, a dirty factory, and like some ship storage. But you're focused on the story that's going on between, like, this little isopod that's crawling over here, and there's a sea star under there. And one of my favorite memories was, I heard a noise. I got a little bit spooked. I looked up, and there were two little raccoons, and they were turning the rocks over on the beach also. I love raccoons. I really identify. I have raccoon tattoo footprints on my arm. And it just felt so wonderful. Like, it made me, like, giggle. Like, it made me feel giddy. Like, oh, they're doing this.
They're hanging out. Yeah.
Like, we're doing the thing. We're outside in nature, and we're experiencing it. We're in it. It's like another memory I have. I was berry picking in this patch once, and a little deer came by, and I didn't want to leave, but I didn't want to frighten him or make him feel like he couldn't also be in this berry patch. So I just tried to act as casual as usual, like, what would be the mood if I were a deer that was just browsing? And he sort of just walked by and looked at me and was like, yeah, okay, that's cool, and continued on his merry way. And I felt so cool. I was like, I did it. The deer has accepted me as just another member of the forest community.
Yes.
Yeah, I just love that when you look up and you realize, like, I think that one of the things humans struggle with is that we feel so alienated from nature. Even when we're in it, we feel like we are these observers who are separated from everything else going around. And so it's a wonderful feeling to look up, look on one side, look on the other, and realize, like, I belong here. That's such a powerful and very comforting feeling, I think.
That's very powerful. I love that you expressed that. Yeah. Just to be here. Yeah, I'm an animal, a human animal,
Yes.
doing my thing along with the rest.
Yeah, just enjoying that easygoing baseline is so like soul nourishing. It's good stuff. And it's like if you're a skeptic or on the fence, which you're probably not if you're listening to this podcast, but hey, I never know. It's always good to make converts. Um, give it a try
Yeah.
sometime. It's amazing what a small dose of dirt time, as they call it, will do for you. You know, no matter what you're going through in your life, I think it's some of the best free medicine out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about learning from artistic mentors. So you mentioned Claire Walker Leslie. I know
Yeah.
that you found John Muir Laws's book, The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling. Tell me about like emulating other artists.
Yeah. Uh, so it's interesting. Like some of my other like artistic idols are actually have nothing to do with like nature journaling per se, but come from the animation world.
Mm.
When I was younger, I was really interested in like potentially pursuing like a career in animation or storyboarding or some kind of entertainment design, is what I think they're calling it now. And so some of the folks that I admired were like Disney animators like Glenn Keane, who was responsible, I think, supervising animator for The Beast and Tarzan, like those characters. Like James Baxter is another one. He famously was the supervising animator on the Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. And drawing these horses, not just running or walking, but doing all these acrobatic things and turning in three-dimensional space. And I think I learned a lot from watching the making of movie featurettes on DVD, special feature bonus packs, because they might show you how to draw a character, talk about storyboarding and visual language. Another person that I'm super enamored with their work is Rebecca Sugar, who was the creator of Steven Universe, that whole series. If you ever look up any of their work online, it's so approachable the way that they can draw characters and situations and scenes in a very quick, non-fussy way when they are storyboarding. And sometimes, like when you see someone else doing something, it makes you feel like you have permission to do it. Like if this professional is doing it, maybe I can too. One of my favorite tips and tricks I learned from Rebecca Sugar was there was a book that featured a bunch of production artwork from the show. And anytime there was a mistake, like a mistake on a drawing or a picture, you would see where it looked like they had just stamped down a post-it note and then just continued drawing, like covered up the mistake and then drew over it on the post-it note. I was like, what? And that
You
means
can do that? Yeah.
I never have to tear out another page and look again. Oh my goodness, this is a game changer. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. It's so valuable, isn't it, to see the way other people do it and just glean little
Yes.
bits of useful things that then can make up your own personal style.
Right. Take what resonates with you, discard the rest, return to it, see if you change your mind, do an exchange. Yeah, I think and I think the challenge for a lot of people, definitely was for me anyway, was the comparison trap of like, this person is so much better than me, but it's like, that's not the point. The only person you are trying to be competitive with is yourself. You're only trying to beat your last score. And in a general way, not every time, not each time you open up your journal. And it makes looking at very accomplished or skilled artists' work even more fun, because you can go like, wow, that's awesome. How can I do that? What kind of skills or tools or knowledge do I need, or training, to be able to accomplish that effect? And then that is, it's not magic. It's just practice and experience, and you can figure it out. You can send that artist an email and ask them.
Yeah.
They
Totally.
might be willing to help you learn and grow. Yeah, it definitely makes scrolling through fantastical artwork, especially in the nature journaling sphere on like social media, Instagram, that kind of thing, a lot more fun and less like defeating, because it can be like intimidating when you see these pretty pictures, for instance.
You made a post online about comparing a bird sketch
Oh
from
yes,
some year and to several years later, and
yeah.
how that felt.
Yeah, it was a red-breasted sapsucker, which are all over the woods here. They drill holes in the trees out in the wetlands, especially things like alders and maples, but all kinds of trees really. And they drink the sap, and I think they might consume insects that are also attracted to the sap, but I have not confirmed that from my own observations. So I will not say that's what they do, but it's possible. And so yeah, I sketched the first drawing from life in 2019, and then the second drawing was, I want to say, 2 years later. And I think that was a huge turning point for me, because like, okay, at that by that point, a couple years had passed since the first drawing. I'd listened to Marley Piper's Unlocking Your Potential video, and so it was the first concrete, because if you're throwing away all of your mistakes, consider this: if you also share this habit, you will lose out on the opportunity
Yeah.
to compare your previous work to your current work,
Yeah.
which is so fantastic, because it's really hard to see how far you've come if you don't have a record of where you've been along the way. Like as they say, it's the journey, not the destination, which is so cliche, but it's cliche because there's a big kernel of truth there. And I think that really was a turning point in like, oh, it's not bad to make a bad drawing. Bad drawings are how you learn how to make good drawings, the sacrificial pancakes. And so like now when let's say that there's a really complicated subject, a plant or something with really complicated divided leaves, for instance, I definitely still feel intimidated by it. And then if my drawing comes out really wonky or weird looking, I just have a laugh about it and go like, cool, I've gotten that one out of the way. Let's do a bunch more. And
Yes.
I know that eventually with persistence, like it's gonna get better. Like it would be weird if it got worse, like the only way is up, like you have nothing to lose and everything to gain from just doing it over and over again.
And you come to know a subject so much better, don't you, by doing
You
one bad
do.
drawing, two bad drawings, three bad drawings, just keep going
Yes.
and you get to know the subject.
Yes, I discovered, it was a couple of years ago, that there were some deer that wandered into my yard, and I started sketching them, and I was not happy with the sketches that came out of those observations. So I like set out on this like month-long adventure of just studying ungulate anatomy and how their
Mm.
legs bend at different angles and how to draw. I studied the work of Bill Barry, his sketches of caribou, for instance. It's amazing what he was able to do from life and memory. Like that has inspired me. That's another thing, is I'm very stubborn about. I don't like to draw from photos or reference.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like a weird like I'm a sucker for pain sort of thing. But like learning to draw from flighty little animals that are not interested in being your figure model, and like learning to draw plants when it's raining and you have an umbrella over you and you're trying to juggle all of your equipment, like that will teach you how to draw better, quicker than working in a cozy chair, comfy chair from reference material, which is totally fine if that's what you want to do. But I think if you want to get more dynamic, more lifelike sketches and poses, like get out there and make some terrible gesture sketches of living animals, and you will see your work improve by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that same subject, birds seem to be a big theme in your work, and birds
Yeah.
are notorious for being difficult to sketch. Tell me about your
Oh yeah.
story with birds.
So I think my earliest birdie memory was when we lived with my grandparents. My parents and I lived. We the bedroom was in such a way, it was like up against the backyard, and there were some windows that would sometimes be cracked open while we were sleeping. And so often the thing that woke me up was the sound of the chickadees. And they have a funny little call, they say like chickadee dee dee, but when I was a little kid, I thought they were saying Mr. BBB, and so I used to call them Mr. BB bird. And
Cute.
yeah, and then like that's what my parents called them. It was the whole thing. And I still think about that. And those were the first birds that I looked at through binoculars. My grandpa had a pair of binoculars, and he never let anyone touch them. So I just waited till he went to work, and I snuck them off of the little shelf. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take a quick look. I'll put them back. He'll never know. And he didn't. I was real sneaky about it. But I took a look at these little perfect black and white gem-like birds up in the trees that I'd seen them, I'd heard them, but I'd never gotten such a close look at them. And that was just like a paradigm shift. Like, oh my goodness, there's stuff going on that all around me that I have had no knowledge of. And like, what else am I missing out on? What else can I check out? Yeah, so chickadees are certainly like my spark bird. I think they're probably a lot of North American spark bird, because they're just so like, they're everywhere. They're noisy. They're friendly. They'll come to your feeder station. They're definitely some of my favorites.
And what about sketching birds? How your relationship with how it's a challenge in the beginning, especially for someone with perfectionist tendencies, and then how you're feeling
Yeah,
about it now.
it's very tough. I have two recommendations, because I know a lot of nature journalers are super into birds, and birds are super flighty. The first one is, if it's something that's allowed where you live, put up a bird feeder,
Mm.
especially in the winter. Participate in the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Project Feeder Watch. that will give you a lot of prolonged views of birds. A lot of times, if they're, really hungry and they're chilling out, they might sit for a long time in one spot. And even if they move, you're in luck because a lot of feeder birds travel in flocks. So you can just skip to the
See the
next
next
one.
one.
Yeah, see, like, okay, who was in that position 5 seconds ago? Who's there now? And then make a composite sketch. The other one is to just be cool, be totally easy breezy with making really imperfect gesture sketches of birds. They don't have to be your goal. You are not a scientific illustrator here. You're not trying to make an infographic for National Geographic. And I think you can let the pressure off of yourself of like, hey, nobody has to see this. If I decide that I fall in love with it, they can. But even if I love it, no one has to see it. This is for me. And shifting the goal of or the definition of what makes a successful journal page from it's a beautiful, pretty picture that's good enough to be in a book to this will help me experience that encapsulated memory again. Is it good enough to take me back in the future? And was I paying close enough attention to see something new or to look at something familiar in a totally new way? And I think that if you focus on goals like that, make those your objectives, the birds will get better all by themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, which is always such a surprise. Like you'll surprise yourself, you'll draw something and you're just, you're not thinking about it. You get really into it, which is means you're in like a flow state, which is
Yes.
where the good stuff comes from. And all of a sudden you'll be like, wow, this is a lot better than
This
what I was doing
works.
2 months ago. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great.
what you said is really great about rethinking your goals. Not have your goal be making art that looks beautiful, but to have your
Yeah,
goal to understand nature a little more, capture something that can help you remember that moment later on. Different sort of goals that are more tangible.
yeah, more tangible. And also, they talk about SMART goals, and part of that is making them realistic and
Mm-hmm.
like practical. And it's sort of like, okay, and you'll hear this from lots of like the nature journal or practitioners about like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this to be perfect? Or if you could redefine it as this is the space where I don't have to be perfect, where
Mm-hmm.
everything I do is fantastic and great because I made something at all. And like, I mean, really make the bar so low for yourself that it's impossible to fail. And
Yeah.
you will see that you like your inner fearful part will gain confidence when you're like, dude, just do whatever. This is your space. You do you. It's fine. Everything's cool. No one has to see this. You can burn it if you want to. And I don't know who to credit this to, this observation. It's not even a direct quote. It might have been on Tumblr, somewhere on the interwebs. Someone had said, like, what a difference it would make if we treated art making, music making, dance, all of that, not as something that was like a measuring stick of your like goodness as a person or your ability, but just as like that's what humans do. Like wolves howl and humans paint, and it doesn't really matter if it's good. Like that is a natural human behavior, just like cooking or just like caring for children or elderly loved ones or whatever it might be. Like that is part of living a rich and engaged human life. And if you can tap into that, even if no one else ever witnesses the fruits of your efforts, that is worthwhile because it was worthwhile to you, because it made you happy one day, because it helped you deal with a challenging situation. That's it. That's all it has to do. Like we're here for such a short time. Like just do the things. Yeah, it's so tough because it's tough to convince yourself of that just as much as it can be to convince anybody else.
Oh, yeah. It's great to remember that, yes, humans, just like we were saying before, humans, just human animals here on Earth for this short time, but that we are actually creative beings, that creativity is something inbuilt in us. And whether that's cooking, whether that's sketching in a nature journal, whatever it is, or creative ideas for making a structure so that we can survive in the winter or whatever it is, we are designed to create, and to tap into that every day or just whenever we can is such a powerful thing.
It is, and I think that if you do any kind of art or drawing, and you let other people know about it, or you show them the stuff that you do, you will hear over and over again, like, I wish I could do that.
Mm-mm-mm.
I wish I could draw. It's like you can.
Yeah.
If you pick up a pencil and make a mark, even if you're using your feet, like that, you did it. Congratulations, you're part of the club. You've done it. You're an artist. You're making art. And I think too, like everybody's creative, even if they don't think they are creative in a conventional sense. Like I think
Yes.
about my partner Tate. who is so good at taking, loose end. Isn't that what they call it? Like in Montessori, like loose
Oh,
parts,
loose parts.
loose parts, right? And making solving problems with really novel solutions. And I was always like impressed and intimidated by that ability of his because it seemed like something I couldn't do. I think the best way I could describe it is like growing up, my dad could look at the most random assortment of ingredients in the kitchen and make something out of it without a
Yes.
recipe.
My mum does that too.
Yeah, yeah. And it used to like, my mom, my brothers and I would be like, we don't know how he does it. And then I started learning how to cook and now I can do it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so I follow Tate around and watch how he solves problems and think like, boy, I wish I could do that. And then one day it was like, well, why don't I? And so like, for instance, I needed a pencil extender, but you go online. I live out in the country; you can't buy them out here. And if you go online, they're $7 or $12, not including shipping and handling. So I went online and I looked around and I saw how people made their own DIY version, and it's like it's so much fun. Not only did I save some money doing this, but I think I like this silly duct tape together
Yes.
one more than I would like one that I just purchased
Of
with money.
course.
And like having that freedom, it's amazing. Like it's like, oh, I can solve problems with like random little fixes too, and it's fun. Like I look for excuses to solve problems or make amends to my home, and it's like, oh, this is just like a natural human. This feels good because it is an adaptive behavior
Yes.
for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I loved something you wrote in your blog post. You wrote about creativity being like a muscle, and that feels very natural because, like you say, we get some pencil marks behind us, and you're feeling stronger. Your drawings are flowing out in a way that feels really great. And one thing that I love that you said that also muscles need rest, and so building in these natural pauses is actually okay. Sometimes we go and we will go full speed at something, and then you just need to wind it back a little, and we can have this little voice that says, "Come on, keep going." But actually, in training a muscle, rest is important. Do you want to
It's
talk a
so
little about that?
Yes, it's so important. I think about, one of my favorite books. I'm blanking on the author's name right now, but it's called Laziness Does Not Exist. And it is just so fascinating to me to think about that. It's like we are trained to have this like inner critic that beats us up if we're not grinding, if we're not hustling, if we're not, putting in the work all the time consistently, which is like, okay, that's great. But it's like, all batteries are going to run out of juice, man. You got to plug your phone in, no matter how awesome and expensive it is. You're going to have to wirelessly charge it, or whatever. And I think that if you can also give yourself permission to have like, how many people have you heard of who are stressed out because they're having art block and nothing
Yeah.
they try is working? And it's like, dude, go learn a new skill. Go
Yeah.
paint your apartment. Go pick up skateboarding. Go buy a bike. Do something totally different, and you will start to have the novel experiences. Like usually, that's a sign you need to like, in the nicest way possible, like get out and go do something different. Like go play. Like that is what
Play.
that
Yeah.
thing. Like you have been looking or thinking about the same things, and your brain's like, look, bro, I keep throwing this at the wall. Nothing is sticking. Go out and talk to some people. Go have a novel experience. You will make some connections, especially if it's like, this is another reason why I love fishing, is because yeah, you're fishing and you're thinking about catching fish, but you have so much time to be
Mm.
idle, you know, um, and you will start to find like, it's like, I've lost my muse, that kind of thing. You'll hear people say that, but it's like, okay, go find it.
Yeah.
Then like you need it, it's out there. It's out there, and you need to find where it wants to lead you, so that you will have the the raw elements from which to create something new and interesting.
Yeah, and that might be an aimless wander. It doesn't have to be like forcing anything. It can be just wandering until something sparks in you.
Yeah, I think about too, like when I went on that whole voyage of like, I'm going to figure out how to draw elk and deer. I did it really intensively all the time. I was super frustrated by it, and eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what, I cannot do this. So I closed my nature journal for like a good 2 months, and I went and did other things. Like we went and visited some family. We went and rode some bikes. Just did something different. Went to museums that weren't talking about nature. Looked at some boat parts, that kind of thing. Learned about maritime history on the Washington coast. And after a while, it was like, oh, this. I started thinking like, oh, that would be something good to put in my journal. And
Yes.
that is your brain saying like, hey, thank you. I had a nice nap from that part of our life, and I'm ready for more. It's like, if you're hungry and you just keep putting food in your mouth, eventually your stomach's going to say, hey, stop, I need a break to do my job.
Yeah.
And your brain, your creativity is the same way. It's very interesting. Like, it will communicate with you if you're willing to listen. It will tell you what it needs, whether it's like, hey bro, we need to like muscle down and practice. Like, hey, you need, book open, button share. Or it's like, bro, just go play frisbee. Like, go watch some like garbage reality television. You will get some laughs. You will get some inspiration. Um, yeah, I think you got to trust yourself, and that's like one of the most challenging things to do. It's so much easier to trust other people and to get permission from them than to give yourself permission and compassion. Yeah, it's crazy that nature journaling can like lead you down this whole like loving yourself
Life
path.
path, yeah. Personal
Like,
growth.
yeah, that's one of the wonderful things about it, is that it's like nature journaling is so much more than nature journaling.
Yes.
It's
That's
like
an amazing quote. I love that.
it's keeping a diary plus plus plus.
100%. I adore that. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely inspiring. I feel my cheeks are sore from smiling. I just feel so happy and inspired. Thank you for all your energy and your wisdom.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic. Thank you for letting me play with some ideas and have a good time. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sonja. I found their energy and wisdom just so wonderful to be around. So many insights and ideas came up to make us think and smile and celebrate what it is to be out in nature with our senses open and our minds ready to find things to be curious about. There were so many great quotes in this interview, but my favorite was, nature journaling is so much more than nature journaling. I love this, and I think it's absolutely true. Nature journaling is a practice that opens us up to a whole world of self-reflection, growth, and looking at things with new eyes. As always, head to the show notes to find links related to today's conversation. Especially check out the blog post that Sonja wrote for International Nature Journaling Week, which was called Confessions of a Recovering Neurotic Naturalist. There's a lot of great insights and wisdom there too. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.